Hello, friends. It's Miss Bilta here with your daily climate lesson for the week for social studies. We're going to be talking about floods and other extreme conditions, so go ahead and follow along as I read out loud. In good and bad ways, climate always has an effect on human lives, but sometimes people get caught in severe weather. Such extremes can change whole communities forever or even destroy them. For example, a tornado might happen and it might devastate the entire town, as well as destroy everything, houses, stores, shops, anything that might have in store is going to be gone. On the flip side of that, a drought happens when an area's rainfall is much lower than normal. For instance, 20 inches of rain per year would be wet for a desert, but it would be a drought for a rainforest, hence the rain in rainforest. In the 1930s, a drought ruined crops in the plains states of the central U.S. This period of extreme dry weather made poverty worse there during America's Great Depression. Mount Pinatubo is a volcano in the Philippines. It erupted in 1991, spewing tons of ash high into the atmosphere. The ash spread out and made a hazy ring around the equator. The haze blocked enough sunlight to cool down global temperatures by 1 degree Fahrenheit. That winter, blizzards and cold weather hit many parts of the world. Scientists believe our planet felt Pinatubo's cooling effects for at least 2 years. We're going to look at this creepy picture of Frankenstein. Incessant, never-ending rain often confined us for days to the house. That makes sense. Usually when it rains, we don't go outside. That's what Mary Shelley remembered about the strangely wet summer of 1816 when she was 18 years old. Stuck indoors, Mary and her friends decided to spend their vacation writing and sharing ghost stories. 2 years later, Mary published her story, Frankenstein. So now you know how Frankenstein came about. Ever heard of the Great American Desert? That name was once used to describe the prairies of Nebraska and Kansas. But in the 1870s, a period of wet weather turned the dry prairie into green farmland. People thought the climate had changed forever, and many hurried to claim land there. So everyone got excited. They're like, yes, wet weather, we can grow our crops. So everybody moved. Some even believed that settlers had changed the climate by farming the land. Rain follows the plow. The plow is the thing they used to grow the crops. But when the wet spell ended in the mid-1880s, the land dried up again, and many settlers left the area. So at one point it was good to live there. The next point it was not good to live there, so they had to move so they could grow those crops because that's how they live. Floods in Peru, drought in Indonesia, though these extreme weather conditions could have a common cause. They are linked to how the atmosphere is affected by a patch of warm ocean water called El Nino. In an El Nino year, trade winds weaken. Sometimes they even change direction. Also, ocean temperature patterns change. In the Western Pacific, the water gets cooler than normal. In the Eastern Pacific, the water gets warmer. The wet weather moves eastward too. Warm water heats the air, which helps make storm conditions. So countries like Peru are hotter and wetter than usual, while countries like Indonesia are drier and cooler. I don't know if you've ever noticed that sometimes, like before it starts to rain, or if you go outside before a storm's happening, it kind of warms up a little bit, and then it'll start to get cooler as the wind picks up. So here's an example of what it's like before a flood and after a flood. So the black lines are the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. So these are the actual rivers before the flood. Here are the rivers after the flood. So you can see how much overcaught of the water went outside of where the river actually flows, which causes a lot of flooding. Scientists call the Great Midwest Flood of 1993 a 100-year flood. They mean that a flood that big happens on average only once in 100 years. About 70,000 people who lived in floodplains, low-lying areas along the Mississippi River and Missouri rivers lost their homes. After the flood, they had a big decision to make. Should they rebuild their homes in the floodplains? Should they move to a higher ground? What would you have done? So I want you to think about that for a minute. What would you have done? Would you want to rebuild and stay where you're at and hope that that doesn't happen again? Or would you want to move to somewhere safer on a higher ground where you know that you wouldn't have that chance of being flooded out again? Okay, so that's your lesson for today, friends. Hopefully you enjoyed it. All you need to do now is go back to your forms under social studies and answer your floods and other extreme weather conditions questions. And I hope everyone has a great day. Come back tomorrow for more. Bye, friends.